Have you ever wondered what happens when a wife believes her husband is lost to the war, but he might still be alive? How does grief shape the choices of those left behind? Can two women share the same sorrow without knowing each other's secret? What mysterious messages from the past haunt their lonely nights? And what happens when hope and fear collide in the shadows of loss? Discover the eerie beauty and haunting twists of this reimagined classic story by Nathaniel Hawthorne, brought to life in a brand new retelling. Classic Storytime Hub presents The Wives of the Dead by Nathaniel Hawthorne, a reimagined classic tale. Before we dive in, subscribe for your daily stories. Now, let's go. 100 years ago, in a bustling port town along the bay, a story quietly unfolded, one that seemed ordinary at first, but carried an unexpected weight of sorrow. It was a damp, gray afternoon in autumn, and rain streaked the windows of a modest two-story house. Inside, the second-floor parlor glimmered faintly with the glow of a dying fire, its simple furnishings touched with small treasures from distant lands and delicate trinkets crafted by Indian hands. The scene, unremarkable to a casual observer, held an intimate kind of stillness. By the hearth sat two young women, both striking in their own way, bound together by grief so raw it needed no words. Each had been married only recently, one to a sailor, the other to a man who plied the land, but in the cruel twist of fate, both husbands had been claimed within days. One lost to the raging storms of the Atlantic, the other to the distant conflicts of Canadian warfare. Friends and neighbors, drawn by sympathy, had filled the small house earlier, their voices soft with comfort, their hands offering gentle touches, and their words drawn from sacred texts. Among them had been the town's minister, who lingered until the light faded from the windows. One by one, the visitors slipped away into the evening, carrying their consolation back to lives untouched by such immediate loss. Yet when the door closed behind the last guest, the widows did not feel relief in solitude. They felt only the pull toward each other. Bound first by the living ties of family, and now by the unspoken bond of shared loss, they turned to one another. No words were needed. Their grief spoke in quiet gasps and tremors, in the soft rhythm of tears falling together. United in sorrow, they leaned close, hearts heavy but intertwined, finding in each other's presence the fragile comfort that the world outside could not offer. After an hour of silent weeping, one of the sisters, the gentler of the two, calm and steady, though not without strength, felt a stirring of reason and faith. Lessons of patience and endurance, long learned yet rarely tested, began to rise within her, reminding her that grief, though overwhelming, need not rule every moment. Moreover, as her loss had come first, she resolved that her duties should resume first, before sorrow could fully claim her. Carefully, she set the small table near the fire, arranging a modest meal with quiet precision. Then she reached out and took her sister's trembling hand. "Come now, dear sister," she said softly. "You haven't eaten a bite today. Let us ask a blessing together on what little we have." Margaret, fiery and impulsive even in grief, recoiled at the words as though they were a sting. The raw pain that had burst from her in cries and lamentations earlier still burned in her chest. "There is no blessing left for me," she sobbed, fresh tears streaking her cheeks. "Why should I ask it? I wish it were God's will that I never taste food again." Her voice shook with anguish, and yet almost immediately the tremor of fear and doubt followed her defiance. Slowly, Mary's calm persistence began to guide her sister back towards some measure of acceptance. Through gentle words and quiet encouragement, she bridged the gulf of despair, drawing Margaret's heart closer to her own composed sorrow. Time passed, as time always does, and evening crept in. The sisters, now alone, followed the rhythm of their home. The two couples, brothers and their young brides, had built their shared life with the modest means common to newlyweds of their station, claiming the parlor as a common space and each a private sleeping chamber nearby. Yet tonight, in the quiet shadow of loss, the rooms felt larger and emptier than ever. The widows retreated to their chambers after scattering ashes over the dying embers of the fire, leaving a single lamp burning softly on the hearth. Both doors were left ajar, revealing glimpses of the bedrooms and the unclosed curtains of the beds, each a silent witness to the other's sorrow. Sleep, however, did not come equally to the sisters. Mary, whose grief had settled into a quiet endurance, soon drifted into a fragile, temporary forgetfulness. Margaret, on the other hand, grew restless and feverish as the night deepened, her heart racing with the stillness that pressed down on the house. She listened to the endless patter of rain, each drop falling in monotonous rhythm, unbroken by wind, and an uneasy impulse made her lift her head repeatedly, peering into Mary's room and the space between them. The cold, steady light of the lamp cast the furniture's shadows against the walls, solid, unmoving, until a sudden flicker of the flames sent them trembling. 2 empty armchairs remained where the brothers had once sat, upright and dignified, heads of their young families. Nearby, 2 smaller seats, once the domains of Mary and Margaret, stood as quiet thrones, relics of a tender power won by love alone. The fire had once bathed the room in warmth and laughter. Now the dim, ghostly glow of the lamp seemed fitting for a reunion of the departed rather than the living. As Margaret lay there, racked by bitter groans and anxious thoughts, a sudden sharp knock echoed from the street door. How my heart would have raced at that sound yesterday, Margaret thought, a pang of memory cutting through her sorrow. Just yesterday, the knock of news from her husband would have sent her trembling with hope and fear alike. But now, she felt nothing but a cold indifference. I care nothing for it now. Let them go. Indeed, I will not rise. Yet even as she murmured these stubborn words, her body betrayed her. Her breath came quick and shallow, and her ears strained to catch the faint repetition of the summons. For it is no easy thing to fully believe that someone who has been another part of oneself is truly gone. The knocking returned, slow, deliberate, measured, each tap sounding as though struck with the soft end of a clenched fist. Words followed, muffled, ghostly, filtered through layers of wall. Margaret's eyes darted toward Mary, still lost in deep, dreamless sleep. Trembling, she swung her legs over the bed, planting her feet on the floor, and began to dress in haste, torn between dread and urgent curiosity. Heaven help me! I have nothing left to fear, and yet I feel more a coward than ever. Grasping the lamp from the hearth, she hurried to the window overlooking the street. The lattice swung open on its hinges, and she leaned slightly into the damp night air. A lantern's glow painted the front of the house in red-gold light, its brilliance reflected in puddles along the cobblestones, while the rest of the street sank into a heavy, consuming darkness. As the window grated, a figure emerged from beneath the overhang of the house. Broad-brimmed hat low, blanket coat wrapped tight, the man tilted his head upward, searching for the face his knock had awakened. Margaret recognized him instantly, an innkeeper, a familiar and friendly presence in the town, whose appearance now seemed both comforting and strangely urgent. "What brings you here, Goodman Parker?" the widow demanded, her voice trembling with a mix of curiosity and caution. "Ah, Mistress Margaret, 'tis you!" the innkeeper exclaimed, relief evident in his tone. "For a moment I feared it was your sister Mary. I cannot bear to see a young woman in sorrow when I have not a word of comfort to offer." Margaret's heart thumped wildly. "For heaven's sake, what news do you bring?" she cried. "Well," Goodman Parker replied, "an express passed through town just within the last half hour, bearing letters from the governor and council all the way from the eastern frontiers. He stopped at my inn for refreshment, and I asked what tidings he brought. He said we had the upper hand in the skirmish you know of, and that the 13 men reported slain are all alive and well, including your husband. In fact, he's been assigned to escort the captured French and Indian prisoners back to the provincial jail. I thought you might want to hear it without waiting another moment, and so I hurried straight here. Good night." With that, the honest man departed, his lantern casting long, flickering shadows along the wet street. Shapes and fragments of the world emerged in the glow, vague reminders of order within chaos, as though memory itself had come to wander over the past. But Margaret did not pause to watch. Joy erupted in her chest, bright and sudden, scattering the gloom that had weighed upon her so long. Heart racing and breathless, she flew to her sister's bedside. Yet at the doorway, a pang of hesitation stopped her. "Poor Mary," she whispered, her voice soft with tenderness. "Shall I wake her only to sharpen her sorrow with my happiness? No, I will keep this joy close to my heart until morning." Margaret crept closer to Mary's bedside, careful not to disturb her. Her sister-in-law's face was partly buried in the pillow, previously hidden in quiet weeping. Yet now it bore an expression of still contentment, as if her heart, like a deep, tranquil lake, had settled because the dead had sunk so far beneath its surface. How strange and fortunate it is that our lighter sorrows often feed the dreams we remember most vividly. Margaret hesitated. She felt a pang of guilt, as if her own sudden joy had betrayed the bond of shared grief, and that revealing her news might somehow lessen the love she bore her sister. With a quick inward breath, she turned away. Yet joy cannot long be held back. It surged through her mind in a rush of ecstatic thought, spilling into sleep and transforming into vivid, wild visions, patterns of delight and wonder, like frost tracing intricate designs upon a winter window pane. Hours later, Mary awoke with a sudden start. She had been entangled in a dream, vivid and intense, though the details had already begun to slip away. All she could recall was that it had ended abruptly at the most compelling moment. For a few lingering seconds, her mind hovered in the haze of sleep, like mist lifting from a morning field, making her unaware of the world around her. Then came the sound, a series of rapid, insistent knocks. At first, it seemed ordinary, like the rhythm of her own breath. Next, she thought it irrelevant, a noise that demanded nothing of her. But gradually, her mind recognized the summons. It was urgent, necessary, and impossible to ignore. At that very moment, memory struck Mary like a sudden spark. The fog of sleep lifted, grief's shadow settled fully across her mind, and the dim glow of the room, the objects, the stillness, restored all the thoughts she had carried in the half-light of dreams. Another sharp knock rang out at the street door. Hoping not to wake her sister, Mary wrapped herself in a cloak and hood, lifted the lamp from the hearth, and hurried to the window. By chance, it had been left unlatched, swinging easily at her touch. "Who's there?" she asked, her voice quivering as she peered into the night. The storm had passed, and the moon now rode high, spilling silver light across fractured clouds. Below, the soaked houses glistened in blackened shadows, puddles shimmered like tiny lakes, and a playful breeze made the rain-soaked world sparkle. Under the window stood a young man in the attire of a sailor, wet as though he had just emerged from the sea itself. Mary recognized him immediately, a man who had once earned his living on short coastal voyages and who, before her marriage, had been an unsuccessful suitor of her own. "What brings you here, Stephen?" she asked, her voice quivering as she peered into the night. "Cheer up, Mary," he said quickly, a bright, earnest tone in his words. "I've come to bring comfort. I arrived home not 10 minutes ago, and the first thing my mother told me was the news of your husband. Without waiting another moment, I donned my hat and ran here. I could not have slept a wink before speaking to you, for old time's sake." "Stephen, I thought better of you," Mary exclaimed, tears spilling down her cheeks as she moved to close the window. She had no wish to mimic the first wife of Zadig, after all. "Wait, hear me out," the young sailor called, his voice urgent and full of life. "You won't believe what I saw yesterday afternoon. A brig coming in from Old England, and guess who was standing on deck, safe and sound, only a little thinner than 5 months ago?" Mary leaned forward, speechless with disbelief. "Your husband himself," Stephen continued, his eyes shining. "He and 3 others clung to a spar when the Blessing capsized. By daylight, with this wind, the brig will reach the bay, and tomorrow you'll see him here. That is the comfort I bring you, Mary. Good night." With that, he hurried away, his lantern bobbing through the shadows, appearing and disappearing as he passed under the houses, until moonlight caught him in sudden brilliance. Mary stood frozen for a moment, suspended between dream and reality, until the truth flooded her heart in a gentle, overwhelming tide. Her first instinct was to wake her sister-in-law and share this miraculous joy. Quietly, she opened the chamber door, unlatched but closed during the night. She stepped forward, her hand trembling, hovering over the slumbering Mary, ready to awaken her with the news that life had returned where death had seemed to reign. But then Mary remembered. Margaret would awaken soon, and her thoughts would drift back to sorrow and loss, made all the sharper by the joy Mary now carried. She let the lamp's gentle glow fall upon her sister, lying still in restless sleep. The drapery around Margaret's bed had slipped aside. Her young cheeks glowed with a hint of color, and her lips parted in a half-smile, a fragile, radiant expression of happiness that struggled to escape through her closed eyelids, like a delicate incense rising from her entire being. "My poor sister, she will wake too soon from this blissful dream," Mary thought, her heart aching with tenderness. Before retiring herself, she set down the lamp and carefully adjusted the blankets, shielding Margaret from the chill that might disturb her feverish rest. Her hand shook lightly as it brushed her sister's neck, and a tear slipped down her own cheek. At that moment, Margaret awakened by the gentle touch and opened her eyes to the quiet, loving presence of Mary.
And thus the story ended. If you liked this journey into the worlds of classic literature, do not forget to support us by subscribing so we can tell you more. And hey, if there's a classic tale you'd love to hear told in this suspenseful style, drop its name in the comments below. Your suggestion might be our next chilling adventure.